Hey there! If you're looking for a fun and easy way to earn rewards, including cash and prizes, check out the link in the video description.
27 years ago, a group of scientists created a symbolic doomsday clock to measure humanity's proximity to self-destruction, or midnight. The hands move closer to, or further away from, midnight, depending on what existential threats exist at that particular time. Addressing the UN General Assembly last year, the UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, announced that the clock had moved to 90 seconds to midnight, declaring that humanity was perilously close to catastrophe. "This is the closest the clock has ever stood to humanity's darkest hour," he said. "We need to wake up and get to work." Guterres named 3 perilous challenges. 1. Extreme poverty. 2. An accelerating climate crisis. And 3. Global nuclear war. Lie flat in a ditch and cover the exposed skin of the head and hands. In 1980, Margaret Thatcher's government published a pamphlet, Protect and Survive, advising people what to do in the event of a nuclear attack. In what was in essence a DIY handbook, people were instructed to hide under a table, place bodies of dead relatives in another room or, if outside, lie on the floor and hope for the best. Adopting an optimistic attitude toward our extinction, the 32-page booklet was ridiculed by a population that knew there was no survival kit for nuclear annihilation. The government no longer distributes booklets that advise us how to survive nuclear war. Instead, it buries its head in the sand entirely, turning a blind eye to the fact that we are getting closer and closer to midnight. After a period of gradual decline that followed the end of the Cold War, the number of operational nuclear weapons has risen again. There are now more than 12,500 warheads around the world, with 90% belonging to Russia and the United States alone, which brings us to Keir Starmer's most recent speech. "National security will always come first," he said, as he pledged to increase defense spending and update Britain's nuclear arsenal. He is right that security is important, but endless escalation is not the answer. What about standing up to the fossil fuel giants jeopardizing the security of our planet? Or abolishing the 2-child benefits cap to end atrocious levels of food insecurity across our country? If he really cared about global insecurity, he would defend a foreign policy of peace and human rights, to ensure we get on with our neighbors in pursuit of a more stable world. Ever since Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, many of us have warned of the rising risk of nuclear escalation, a risk that was heightened last year when Russia announced plans to halt participation in New START, the last remaining nuclear arms control treaty with the U.S. In a recent worrying development, Kyiv intelligence sources have reported that a Ukrainian drone has targeted a long-range radar deep inside Russia, the primary function of which is to alert the security forces of a nuclear attack. It is estimated that a nuclear war between Russia and the U.S. could kill 200 million people in the near term. The former Defense Secretary Ben Wallace has previously said he expects the UK to be at war by the end of this decade, which is used as a basis for a continued increase in our already bloated defense budget. The Labour Party has also signaled it will raise defense spending. But why can't our media ask politicians some simple questions? What are you doing to prevent the descent into a protracted, all-out war with Russia? Why can't you learn from Latin American and African countries and establish zones of peace? Meanwhile, nuclear threats have loomed over the Middle East because our political leaders lack the ability and willingness to facilitate de-escalation and diplomacy. Our government could have called for a ceasefire in Gaza from the very beginning. They instead ignored warnings from the anti-war movement for de-escalation, and came far too close to an all-out conflict with Iran. Even without the involvement of more global players with nuclear capabilities, the human consequences of such a war would have been catastrophic for the entire world. Remember, doomsday need not be nuclear for it to be an extinction-level event. The first 2 months of Israel's bombardment of Gaza produced more greenhouse gases than the annual emissions of 20 of the world's most climate-vulnerable countries combined. The only winners are the arms companies making huge profits from death and destruction.